Here's an experiment for you. Take passionate experts in human resource technology. Invite cross-industry experts from inside and outside HR. Mix in what's happening in people analytics today. Give them the technology to connect. Hit record. Pour their discussions into a beaker. Mix thoroughly. And voila, you get the HR Data Labs podcast, where we explore the impact of data and analytics to your business. We may get passionate and even irreverent, but count on each episode challenging and enhancing your understanding of the way people data can be used to solve real-world problems. Now, here's your host, David Turetsky.
Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast. I'm your host, David Turetsky. Like always, we try and find fascinating people inside and outside the world of HR to talk to you about what's happening in the world of business today. We have a fascinating guest for you today, Yasmine Mustafa, who is the co-founder and CEO of Roar. Hello, Yasmine. How are you?
Hi, David. I'm doing fantastic today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about Roar.
Sure. Yeah. So I am in Philadelphia. I founded Roar almost 10 years ago. People say I have an interesting backstory. I am a refugee of the Persian Gulf War. Yeah. Okay. I'm a refugee of the Persian Gulf War. I actually came here very suddenly, almost. It'll be 33 years in a few weeks. Wow. I was sitting in a bomb shelter. I was 8 years old with my family, my parents, my siblings, when all of a sudden 2 ambassadors came through the door looking for my baby brother, who had just been born in the States 9 weeks prior. Wow. And they told us we had an hour packed to bags, put us on a plane, brought us to Philly. It was very different, as you can imagine. New culture, new language, didn't know anyone. Right. I lived in the same building where my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, I could just literally go upstairs and downstairs and see family.
Wow.
And we were thrust into a lot of unknowns. And anyway, long story short is 7 years later, when I was applying for college, I learned I was undocumented, unfortunately, and the clock had reset. So I had to reapply to get the paperwork, which was shocking, because I was brought over by the government.
Right.
And then at 18, my dad decided he was fed up with the immigration system, hopped on a plane with 2 bags, but first stopped at the bank and took all the family savings with him. No. So then it was my mom, my siblings, and I. We didn't really have much choice. I know it sounds very, very stressful, and of course it was, but I think we came to grips of there's no other option. So it actually almost makes it easier to figure out what to do next. And so we all worked under the table. I worked really in hospitality for 10 years, mostly back of kitchen, front, hostess, waitress, whatever job I could get. And it was there that I unfortunately experienced a lot of unsafe working conditions, not just because of just the hospitality industry in general, but because of my status. I had bosses who felt very emboldened by it and said and did things that really no one should say or do to another human being. Right. So that's a little bit more of my history, which led me to starting Roar, which is completely focused on protecting at-risk, vulnerable people.
Thank goodness. So, and what is Roar? Obviously that's Roar's mission, but how does that manifest itself for organizations today?
I love what we do because of what I just shared with you, because what we do is we help protect frontline workers. We provide peace of mind to the everyday worker that might experience either increased harassment, violence from guests, patients, or because they're injured or something happens on the job. They can call help with just one push of a button to get someone to their exact location, either from nearby staff or emergency services.
And what we'll do is we'll put a link to Roar in the show notes that anybody can, if they feel it's unsafe or if they want more information, they can go and reach out as well.
Yeah, please do. I just spoke to someone yesterday who reached out because she has an employee who's being stalked. Ugh. And this person was a former classmate she hasn't seen in years, and he's sending her text messages, I want to drink your blood. It's just like, there's there's a lot of things going on in this world. And yeah. I love that this employer she wants to make sure that this person has what they need, that they reached out to try to see what they can do to help.
Well, we're certainly going to touch on those topics in a moment. But first, like we do every single HR Data Labs podcast, we have to ask you, Yasmine, what's one fun thing that no one knows about you?
I was just talking to my boyfriend over the weekend about what we want to do when we retire.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was actually kind of surprised by my answer. I think I want to work at an ice cream store.
Wow.
And I know this sounds so simple, but what I've noticed is anytime you go to an ice cream store, it's basically you're serving happiness.
Exactly.
Like you're in front of kids, old, it doesn't matter where you're from, what you look like. Every time you hand over that ice cream, everyone smiles. And I really like that, the simplicity and the joy of that, what that experience must feel like.
I will tell you that my children would love to actually be your best clients. Although we're not in Philadelphia, wherever you are, we'll come and we'll be your best client. By the way, that's much better than the alternative that you had put in the outline, which is that you were almost going to be a professional poker player, which I would never want to play poker against you because I am the worst poker player in the world. So.
I forgot about that. Yeah, in college, it was my side hustle to pay my way through school, and that was actually really fun.
Yeah, there you go. And so the IRS, she's just kidding. She never really time off with it.
I didn't do it because it's the bad beats that get you every time that you can't stop thinking about. The wins, of course, you're happy, but those bad beats, they stay with you for such a longer period of time. And my heart, I don't think I could survive doing that as a profession.
When I coach goalies, especially young goaltenders in ice hockey, the first thing I tell them is to forget your losses and to forget your goals that are scored against you. Think about it as just something that happened and you have to move on. Because whether you're playing golf or poker or whatever, if you focus on the bad stuff that just happened, it'll taint the next thing that happens and the next thing, and you won't be successful. So
that is such good advice. Did you see Ted Lasso, Be a Goldfish? This is just, so by the way, I think that show is such an amazing show for HR leaders to watch, because I feel like it's just really it's leadership. That's what the show is all about.
Right.
But I loved his advice.
Mental health issues as well. So it covers off on a lot of different things. Yeah.
Yeah. And just Ted Lasso's advice to one of the members he's coaching. And this is, I swear, not a spoiler. Is just he gives this lesson of just be a goldfish when something bad happens. Goldfish have a memory of 10 seconds. That's right. And let it go. And I really appreciated that lesson.
That's right. I always sing from Frozen, but I'm not going to do that here because people know I barely have a voice for radio, and I certainly don't have the face for it. Or actually I do. So let's move on and talk about your topic. So today we're going to be talking about the increase in workplace violence, which is one of the more serious topics we've covered in the HR Data Labs podcast. We're going to talk about some of the underlying factors that actually drive it right now and what its impact is to HR as well as to an organization, and maybe some strategies to help safeguard your employees. Yasmine, your first question is, and it's awful to talk about, but we have to. What is workplace violence, and why is it being caused? Why is it so prevalent right now?
Welcome to the Hire Her podcast, where women in talent call all the shots. We know, another recruiting podcast, just what the industry needs. Okay, but hear us out. You ever spend hours sourcing that perfect candidate, but they end up ghosting you harder than your Hinge date? Or finally, you get that hiring manager feedback, only for them to, of course, say, can we see more candidates? Lame, right? But let's talk about what's really lame in the industry. How is it that 65% of recruiters are brilliant women, yet most of the decision makers look like a convention for middle-aged dudes named Brad?
That's where we come in. Hire Her isn't just another podcast about hiring trends you already heard like 50 times this week. We're here to elevate women in talent, share their career journeys, and make sure they take the lead. Because let's face it, if recruiting is the backbone of every company, why are we still fighting for a seat at the table? So whether you're a recruiter, a talent leader, or just someone trying to swim through the sausage fest of TA leadership, we got you, girl. Welcome to Hire Her, the recruiting podcast where women's voices aren't just heard, but they're leading the conversation.
So subscribe now, because middle management Brad sure as hell isn't going to do it for you.
Yeah, great question. It's unfortunately the worst it's ever been. And a lot of it is due to not having supportive systems for underlying social issues. So what do I mean by that? Unfortunately, the wealth gap is widening, and that is leading into a lot more cases of homelessness, people experiencing homelessness. The mental health crisis continues to grow. And also there's more drug abuse and alcohol abuse than there's ever been. Right. So all three of those combining into one, we're essentially living in a pressure cooker is what it feels like. And what's happening is it's causing people going into workplaces and there being this instability of not sure how to either regulate emotions, or because someone has altered mind, leading to increased harassment or physical assaults against frontline workers. And it's usually retail, healthcare, hotels, really anyone that's dealing with a customer, a patient, a guest is more likely to experience that. Most of it is verbal. And by the way, the cases of instability are the highest they've ever been. And NPR just had an episode about this that was really interesting to listen to. But the impact of that is vast, right? Because when you're yelled at on the street, or especially when you're trying to do your job, your productivity plummets, your morale plummets, you're more likely to call off. It stays with you, kind of like we were talking about the bad beats. You remember that negative behavior more. And anyway, so what's causing it is just this instability that we're seeing amongst our society. And workplace violence is anything where it has to do with harassment, verbal, physical, against a worker in the workplace.
I mean, social media is fertile with videos of whether it's a client or a customer at an airport or in an airline situation where someone is just, it looks, whether they're on alcohol, drugs, or whatever, they're just going off the deep end. They're literally, you don't know why, and probably this is one of the issues you're talking about, is there must be under so much stress that all of a sudden they explode, and they're exploding at the wrong people. Obviously, they shouldn't be exploding at anybody, but they're harming the people who are trying to keep them safe on an airplane at 35,000 feet in situations that could put all of the passengers' lives in jeopardy.
Exactly. I just saw a video on Reddit of I don't know if you saw this, a passenger opened the exit door while the plane was mid-flight. I mean, how insane is that? Not just risking, of course, himself, but everybody around him.
Well, there's no words, right? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, maybe they wanted to commit suicide, but it boggles your mind. I mean, like bringing a loaded gun into a manufacturing plant for what? There's only one purpose for that, and it's inflicting damage. And so, as you said, there's economic instability, there's social instability, there's political instability, obviously. There's the socioeconomic instability. You mentioned homelessness, you mentioned stress. All of that's driving people to do things they normally wouldn't do. Then there's the things that people do all the time, like bullying or sexual harassment, where whether it's stress or whatever, there's never an excuse for this. But if you're thinking about the current causes of it, why does it seem like there's a pinnacle happening now? It just seems like everything's coming to a place where it's a daily occurrence, and we've kind of droned it out because it all seems like noise now. Why does it seem like it's so frequent and so fertile right now?
I think we have different answers from different people. I think for me personally, it's been building for a very long time. And I think COVID kind of unleashed it in a much bigger way. I think we're more in pain than we've ever been. I think a lot of people have not been able to deal with it, especially based on maybe the losses that they've had. But I also think that there is more mistrust than there's ever been. There are studies that have shown we're more apathetic than we've ever been. We've become used to seeing what we see. And I think, unfortunately, we've lost some of our humanity.
Which is awful to say, but it's certainly true. We used to have this concept of neighborhood. We used to be able to walk around our neighborhood and say hi to people and not get these side glances like, what's wrong with them that they're saying hi to me? Or what's their ulterior motive? What's going on here? I don't send my kid out to play with the neighbor's kids anymore. That's how I grew up, where I used to meet at a neighbor's house. I didn't even tell my mom where I was going because she knew that, I was in the neighborhood, I was safe. It doesn't happen anymore.
I think there is an upside and downside. I think the downside is technology, unfortunately, has made it so that we can get information at our fingertips and we hear the worst of the worst. That's the news that seems to capture our attention. And I would say before COVID, we were actually safer than we've ever been. So the reality of what the world was and what we thought it was, our perception was actually very, very off. I think to your point, we did used to have more tight-knit communities where people would see each other at churches or they would stoop. I don't know if you have stoops where you are, but I'm in South Philly and we're very much a stooping neighborhood. But, once air conditioning became more common, once technology became more ubiquitous, we are less connected than we've ever been. We actually just had a neighborhood meeting where the main message of the person running it, she said, get to know your neighbor before you need your neighbor. Because unfortunately, that's, these days, I mean, I've lived on my block or my house for 2 years, and I have to go out of my way to get my neighbors to engage with me because we have become shut off and closed off.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is an upside. I think that if we remember the humanity, not just within ourselves and others, and we find a way to engage, I think we can turn things around. And I know we're going to talk about what HR professionals can do. And I'd love to dig more into the upsides of there are solutions, there are things to help remedy this.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking subscribe. This podcast is made possible by Salary.com. Now, back to the show.
Let's talk about the impact to HR now. Let's talk about what does workplace violence do that then touches on how HR reacts to it, how they set strategies for it, how they may put in place policies around it, and then what's the overall organizational impact?
Great question. Yeah, I would say short-term or long-term. I'll divide them into those. Short-term, as soon as there's a workplace violence incident, the entire morale of an organization plummets because now an employee that someone knows has been hurt, has been impacted. There needs to be communication on both sides in terms of what's going on. And what stats show is anytime someone is hurt in the workplace, not only are they more likely to leave, but the others around them are more likely to leave. So right now, the biggest impact that we're seeing amongst HR is staffing shortages, especially in organizations that have, or industries that have a lot of frontline workers. The three biggest industries facing this right now, hospitality, healthcare, and retail. They can't hire workers fast enough. And a lot of that is because they're not happy with their job because who wants to be yelled at? There's also, of course, loss of productivity. When there is an incident, people are mentally focused on that, and it's harder to get beyond it to do your everyday work. More people actually call off after an incident happens, and then that doesn't even include the costs that's associated with it. In healthcare, nurses are more likely to be attacked than police officers and prison guards. I mean, that's just nuts, right? And
crazy. Yeah.
And right now, 80% of first-year nurses don't plan on coming back. So it's not just that the shortage has been existent and it's already bad, but as Gen Zs enter the workforce, they're less likely to put up with it and they're leaving in droves. So you can't even, the staffing shortage is widening, which is unfortunate. And then there's workers' comp claims, right? Because when someone calls off, you have to file a claim. On average, it's about $9,500. And then when they can't work, you have to bring someone else in, either from a staffing agency or hire or tell an employee to stay overtime and pay them overtime. So there's all these ripple effects that unfortunately increase costs. And what we've seen is a lot of HR organizations, of course, they struggle with turnover and recruitment sometimes in these industries where workplace violence is the worst. But sometimes they see those as indirect costs. But if they were more focused on them, not only can that contribute to bottom line savings for the organization, but actually helping be able to come up with solutions that best fit their workforce.
And Yasmine, you brought this up before, but I think it bears mentioning again. These people who are the focus or the target of the attacks, they're mostly the lowest paid people. They're mostly in economic situations that aren't great to begin with. When they get attacked, it affects their mental health, their economic health, and probably the health of their families as well. And so it creates a cycle or a spiral downwards for all the people involved because they can't afford not to work and they cannot afford to not be in a position mentally, physically, or whatever to be able to get that paycheck. So, and workers' comp does not cover, 100%. It certainly doesn't cover the overtime that they may have gotten. And it then just sets the entire spiral downward. What do we do, or how do we deal with that? Because it's also in places where you can't really filter people coming into a retail organization. You can't really filter people coming into a healthcare organization. They are going to come in because they're patients. They are going to come in because they're customers. And we could put a metal detector at the door, but that doesn't stop people from picking up something on a shelf and using it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great question. I think there's a few things. I think right off the bat, because exactly what you said, they tend to be the lowest paid people. And to some organizations, they might seem disposable because the turnover is already high. So why focus on retaining versus just getting a recurring influx? I think I'm sure your listeners understand more than anyone why retention costs and why retention is so important within an organization. But I think immediately, one of the things I've seen that's been successful are HR organizations that do invest in mental health of their employees, all employees, not just managers, senior level, but there are now business subscriptions for Headspace, Calm. There's organizations that you can bring in, and so a lot of them are actually offering free counseling sessions. I think that's huge, and that's, by the way, as an addition to health insurance, because unfortunately, most of the time, it doesn't cover mental health benefits.
But the key is not to do that after an event has happened, but the key is to have that as part of your normal course of business, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Another normal course of business, I would say, is investing in de-escalation training. And so there are experts out there that can come into an organization or even do a Zoom and teach workers what to watch out for so they can deter or mitigate an event before it even happens. What are the warning signs that someone might get to the point where they're verbally or physically attacked? And what's really amazing about that is just how much more empowered workers feel as a result, because now they have the tools. If someone comes in that unfortunately is experiencing addiction, we're always afraid of what we don't know. So being able to fill in the gaps of here's the ABC of how to respond or how to watch out for something helps people feel more confident about being able to address that situation, which reduces stress, not just in the workplace, but of course, across their communities.
We've seen police departments who've taken this de-escalation training, especially given the fact that there's a rise in the mental health issues and there's a crisis, as you brought up before. So that's one great example of how organizations can help try and alleviate the potential for workplace violence. What are other strategies that HR might be able to employ, or other examples that you might pick out that might be able to help lessen the potential for those happening as well?
Yeah, well, de-escalation training, people think it's expensive. It's not. I am happy to send referrals your way if you want to post them too, so that people are aware of them. Pollock Peace Building Solutions, Crisis Prevention Institute are amazing resources out there. I would also say, one, there is an incident that happens, to talk about it. A lot of people will try to say, hey, this happened, maybe not even communicate at all. But I think having a debrief session with all employees there so that their voices are heard, unfortunately, that's not the norm. And I think HR can be more proactive of listening to employees and what they say, but also employees are usually going to come up with the best ideas of what to do to help prevent it next time. We've also seen the organizations that have even just like a sign, like one of the things we do, and this is not a sales pitch, we do offer buttons that call for help immediately.
Right.
One of the things that shocked me is just our decal. We have a decal that we add to the window. Just that alone lets people know, hey, like this store, this facility is protected and it's less likely for them to act out as a result. So whether it's a CCTV camera or whatever it is, I think that's another way and a low effort way to be able to mitigate and prevent incidents from happening. But employees are going to know best what they want and what would make them feel safer.
Hey, are you listening to this and thinking to yourself, man, I wish I could talk to David about this? Well, you're in luck. We have a special offer for listeners of the HR Data Labs podcast. A free half-hour call with me about any of the topics we cover on the podcast or whatever is on your mind. Go to salary.com/HRDL consulting to schedule your free 30-minute call today. But I think the training that you're talking about is really important. One of the things that happened to me, because I'm a 9/11 survivor, is when we were put into a room afterwards and they talked to us about what we observed, one of the things that people talked about was that some people didn't think that the fire alarm that first went off was real. Because someone came on the PA right after and said, stay in place, don't move. We don't know if this is real or not. And the people who listened to that perished. And so, having that ability to say, I think there's a fire here, or I think there's a problem, get the hell out of the building. Having that instinct is different than having the training to be able to deal with these things, just like the shelter in place or other warnings that happen nowadays. The people who ignore those things are usually the people who get affected by them. And so what I'm trying to say or ask is, how do you tell people, or how do you convince people, when you hear something or when you see something, do something. Don't just sit on your butt at your desk. Just do something. We have too much going on these days that's actually real and dangerous to you to not act on your instinct of get the hell out. So how do you help people try and figure out how the hell do you get out when people are telling you, no, stay at your desk.
Yeah.
F you, I'm getting out.
Yeah. First of all, I didn't know that. I'm sorry to hear that.
That's okay. That's all right.
I would say that's where training comes in. And it's not just a one-time thing, of course. It's reinforcing the training. And one of the hardest things that employers have to do and ensure is really drilled into the workers that they have is to treat every single training incident as though it's real, especially when there's a simulation. So a lot of facilities right now, especially in healthcare and hotel settings, are doing active shooter training. Of course, they'll do the training initially. And some of the time, by the way, a lot of police departments now offer it. So they'll come in. And what's nice about that for the facilities, they become more familiar with not just the people there, but also the layout in case something does happen. But once they do a simulation, you can't pretend that it's a simulation. You have to pretend as if it's real and
exactly
and fight against that fight versus flight instinct. And that's why reinforcing the training over and over. A lot of facilities don't do this, and we have to remind them. Bring it up in your safety moments, your pre-shift meetings. This is something that should be continuous. It is not one and done, unfortunately. That's not the kind of world we live in today.
When I grew up, we were worried about the Soviet Union exploding nuclear weapons over our houses, over our schools. And we used to do the bomb training where we used to go into the hallways and put our heads between our knees. And, we literally did this probably not once a month, but certainly once a quarter. And they use the siren and all that stuff. And so for people my age, from this demographic, from this particular area, I think it may have been all across the US, but it was drummed into our brains that when you hear something like that, you've got to move. And I think that it's kind of been lost on a lot of people. And now with active shooter training, I think people are now realizing that it could affect them now, which is awful. I hate the fact that, and I get really upset about it, so I'm trying not to do that right now. But, when you hear about school shootings, and my son is in 5th grade, and it could affect him, and it bothers the crap out of me. But how do we teach our kids that this is not a video game? And there's no reset. I know you're talking about active shooter training and other things like that, and that you have to go through those trainings. But, how do we make sure that they understand the message of this isn't a game and you need to react the moment you hear something like this?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think, at least, I'm sure it depends, which for children versus adults, children, we tend to feel more invincible than adults do. And I think what's hard is, I don't think it's a one answer that fits all. I will say in certain types of training, de-escalation training is not one of them, but active shooter training, one of the things we've seen is the impact it has on the mental health of the worker as well. So yes, they're being empowered because they have information now, but then now they're thinking of themselves in a situation where there might be an active shooter. So it's not just having the training, but it's talking about it, repeating it, enforcing it, making sure that it becomes like a built muscle so that you know exactly what to do and taking those incidents seriously.
Well, we can talk about this for a really long time, and it is really important to people's lives. So all I can do is say thank you, Yasmine, for what you do and what Roar does. And this seemed like it went from being a to a because
No.
there's nothing fun, there's nothing happy about workplace violence.
Yeah.
It is a fact of our world right now.
Absolutely. I would say people do want to take action, long-term action. I think one thing they could do is become involved with their city council to see what they're doing to increase the number of public bathrooms. Believe it or not, having more government-run public bathrooms actually helps people be safer, because now people who are planning on shooting up, they're not going to a Starbucks bathroom. They have a place to go. Harm prevention sites, having safe injection sites. Now you're not just seeing it on the street. It's actually pretty amazing, the correlation of public bathrooms to safety. And then being able to work with them on how do we support the initiatives that they have currently to help reduce homelessness, addiction, mental illness. The more funding that they have allocated for mental health, the safer the community is. I think one thing we have to remember, just to go back to what we were saying at the beginning, is we're a community. We're not, It's not just us. We're all living together. And the more we act as one and take care of each other and see what we can do to lift up those who are most vulnerable, the safer and more connected and happier we will be. Kind of like when you get, an ice cream cone handed to you and you can't help but smile no matter how terrible the day you've had.
That's right. So we're going to look forward to Yasmine in her next career as being the vendor of happiness. You can add that to your title there, Yasmine. Thank you so much for everything you do. And thank you for being a part of the HR Data Labs podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And thank you all for listening. Take care. And please, as we've been talking about, stay safe.
That was the HR Data Labs podcast. If you liked the episode, please subscribe. And if you know anyone that might like to hear it, please send it their way. Thank you for joining us this week, and stay tuned for our next episode. Stay safe.